Hey guys, Shanna Kramer here with Creatively Uncorked, and today we are going to be painting this rusty doorknob. This is the March Creative Box Live 2021. It's the more challenging painting of the month. So we have a couple of techniques that we're going to cover in this one, and a couple of different paint colors. If you get your box from Creatively Uncorked, then you'll have these brushes. There should be an angle shader. There should be a filbert, which is a medium filbert, about a ½ inch, and there should be a small round. Okay, you can use any other brushes that you choose. These are just the basics. Some of the color mixing that we're going to be doing, our basic colors that we have for this painting are going to be the standards: red, yellow, blue, black, and white, and only a small amount of black. The only part of this painting that really has black paint at all is the key and the keyhole, and that's about it. So as I've traced mine out here, and yes, I'm just using a reused canvas here. It's not a big deal. You can use a new canvas, of course. But I just traced mine out with a ruler. So I know we always have the tracings every month, but this time I actually did use a ruler for some of these lines. Obviously, you know, not everything, but one of the challenges with this painting is straight lines. So I don't know about you, but I am not that great at them. So for me, it definitely is very helpful to use a ruler. Okay, so I've got my three main colors, and I'll just take a little bit of, I'm going to leave it at that. I will be adding white to my plate here in a little while, but first thing I want to do is get my background covered. If you are using your own paints, a color that you might want to try using is burnt sienna. But because we're mixing, I'll show you how to get that same color out of the paints on your plate. Taking a look at this original here, up in the corner, you can see this painting is mostly made up of that rusty color and then also the green, like old paint color. So those are our two main colors that we'll be using, and we'll just have to mix all of those. So my main first color is going to be a lot of red, a lot of yellow. Mixing that up. It's going to be kind of an orangey brown, and take a little bit of blue. Maybe a touch more blue, because we do want it to be a little more on the brown side. It just has to be kind of a really orangey reddish brown. How's that? A little more red, a little more orange. Too brown. Oh boy. More orangey, more orangey. Okay, another trick that I'm doing with this as I start up, I traced with a Sharpie some of these because I'm going to cover the entire canvas with my reddish brown color. And I want to be able to see these lines. Okay, that's pretty good. And you can notice already that you can see the Sharpie lines pretty darn clearly right through the paint. Pencil lines you're going to cover up at least a little bit unless you're painting super thin, but Sharpie lines you can see through up to a couple of coats of paint it takes to cover Sharpie. If you're painting your edges of your canvas, that's fine. Just make sure you paint the front of your canvas first. Give it a chance to catch up on the dry time. Oh, too much yellow. Okay. And one thing that's probably going to happen if you are mixing your color instead of using it out of a tube is every time you dip your brush in paint to pick up a little bit more paint, you're probably going to get a slight variation in that color. And that's just painting. It's not bad. So if that happens, don't think that you messed up on something, because you didn't. You're just adding some different color variations to it, that's all. And it's those color variations that make it interesting, that make it pretty. Okay, so got my background covered. At this point, if you want to go ahead and cover your edges, you can do that as well. And I think I'll do that while I'm waiting for the front to dry. So if you This is the second take on this video here. I didn't even notice it. I apologize for that, but somebody contacted me and said, hey, about that rusty doorknob video. Did you know it doesn't have sound? Sure enough, my fuzzy studio assistant, Irie, must have stuck her big fat tail into some of the buttons and hit the pause, or hit the mute button, because, yeah, I didn't even notice it. I was painting through the whole rest of the video, did not know that there was no sound. So, tragic. So here I go, painting it again. Thanks, Irie. Almost done. All right, so here we are, getting done with this one. I'm tempted to do a watercolor version of this. We weren't doing watercolor back in March. We started doing that in April, but I've not done rust in watercolor before, and I think it might be interesting to try. So I just might do that. Hold on, I'm going to mute it, and then I'll unmute it when I come back after blow drying my background. Welcome back. Now we have our background completely dry, well, almost completely dry, and ready to paint our greens. So next I'll start mixing up a couple of the greens. I'm taking that same big angle shader brush, rinse it out, wipe that paint off. Now this time I'm going to take a big scoop of yellow, little dot of blue, and this, on these greens, we definitely want some variety. If you look up at this background here, you can see there's quite a few different shades of green in there. Touch more blue, and there's a lot of it, so don't be afraid to mix up too much green. This was an old doorknob that was painted. The walls around it had been painted, multiple layers, and this was layers and layers of paint that were peeling off and rust showing right through. Interesting picture. All right, so my green is pretty green. Okay, so I'm going to add some white to that. Make it a little bit opaque because we don't want it to sink into the background. We want it to kind of sit on top of the background, so make it a little opaque. And what do you think of that color? Does it need to be more green? I mean, more blue? Yep, more blue. So what I'm doing here to compare colors, I'm just holding my brush up to the original, and that's getting to be pretty close. Maybe even a slight amount bluer. Okay, I think that's pretty good. All right. So you can start painting on here kind of anywhere you want. But I think I want to try to stick to, I'll try to start up at the upper left and work my way down toward the lower right, so there's less chance of me sticking my hand in the paint. And you have this angle shader that makes really great straight lines. Okay, touch of white in that, I guess I'm going to do. All right, so I'm lining it up in the corner and then just pull straight up. And just kind of drag your brush, okay? You don't want to fill it in entirely with paint, just drag your brush along it lightly. And then you're going to get that kind of that really textury look, which is exactly what we're after. All right, now I have this edge in here, which is going to be a little bit more shadowy. So I'm going to hold off on that and then come up here to, yeah, because this is going to be a little more shadow and then this is going to be a little bit brighter. So I'll come back up here to the top, right above that doorknob plate, and just kind of bring in some of those greens. Again, line up your straight edge on your brush there. And if you don't have an angle shader, a flat will work just fine. Okay, kind of going both ways here, just lightly dragging the brush so my background color is most certainly showing through. Getting a little more blue in there. A little more white. And this is one where you are constantly going to be color mixing, color correcting, color adjusting. So if you are not getting the color right off the bat, yep, that's normal. Don't worry about it. Keep going. Okay, so now I've got this lighter green area, so I'm going to take a little bit more white. Come right down the edge. Do this kind of carefully. You want a straight line as much as possible. One last try on that straight edge there. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. All right, so I'll go back into my really dark green. Now I have, okay, so I'm kind of going square by square, one little area at a time, and filling that in. So I should fill this in. Well, I've got the dark color on here now, so doing the dark color. And leave the edges. In this case, you're going to want to leave kind of a lot of, like you can see how much rust is around the edges, and that's not rust on top of there. That's just showing through the paint that's on the background. So blending a little bit different paint. Each time I pick up a color, I'm picking up a slightly different color, and that's going to keep this painting interesting and keep the color variations going. Okay, I might go over that one a little bit later with some darker shadowy colors. We'll see. I do have some purples to add to my shadows later, so I'll worry about that in a minute. Let me see. All right, let's go with this lighter area right here. Same color, a little bit of blue, more white this time, a little bit more white. Line up your brush and then just drag that out to see, is that too bright? Yeah, it should be a little bit more green. Keep adjusting your greens. Does it need to be warmer? If it does, add more yellow. Does it need to be cooler? Add more blue. Does it need to be darker? Mix up a batch with less white. If it needs to be brighter, add more white. So I'm just trying to get my color layers down here in the first place, and then I'll add a few bright streaks. So now I'm just picking up a little white, and I'll just bring some bright areas, blend that right into the colors that I just put down. So this really, really brightens up some areas. It keeps that wonderful texture. I'm just dragging the brush. Okay, don't want to go overboard. If you go over it too many times, your color will smooth out too much and become bland. No bland colors. All right, so that is looking pretty okay. Okay, I think as long as I've got that kind of lighter green right there, now I want to go back to the door behind that doorknob plate. And I guess if I'm covering up the edge of my key a little bit there, that's fine. I'll be painting over it, and it's going to be black, so it'll cover just fine. A little bit more white in that color, I think. Well, that's nice and bright, isn't it? Maybe a touch more white, just a little bit more. Okay, one of the things about adding white is, for one thing, it'll make it more opaque, so it'll cover your background. Your rust won't really show through it that much. The other thing is it's going to brighten it up. And keep in mind contrast. So what's the center focal point on this painting? Take a look at the original over here. What's the part that your eye is drawn to? Like, you might catch a few points around here, but your eye is really drawn to that key in the keyhole. Reason being is because it's such a high contrast in that area. There's a lot of really bright colors around the keyhole, and then the keyhole and the key are both black. So it's the most detail, and it's the most contrast. So your eye will just be drawn to that area. So when we start filling in our plate, then we just want to make sure that we have that pretty dark, or pretty light, I mean, right behind the keyhole. Okay, so we still have a couple of blocks here to fill in. I see why this one looks so funny. So there should be a line there. I probably had it with pencil, but I did not have it with Sharpie. Well, so be it. That's okay. And that is going to be a shadow color. So I'll take a little bit more blue into that green. And kind of watch which way you're holding on to that there. I'm just going to draw in my line quickly with a brush because I didn't have it with the Sharpie, so. All right. I might be able to get a slightly darker, shadowier color in there when I get. I'll come back with some purples and some more shadows in just a little bit. But I definitely think that's going to need some purple. Same with right down here. Okay, so let's take that dark green again. That dark bluey green. Kind of looking a little flat over there. So I think I'll start with a purple already. So purple, of course, is going to be red and blue. There. And I'm, again, just dragging this lightly. This is a shadow color. This is a shadowy area. So this should be nice and dark. Sorry, getting a little off camera there. All right, not so bad. We're gonna need some blue for sure. So I'll take more blue, mix in with a little tiny bit of that green, and I'll go to this shadow right under that left board. And if it works better for you to rotate your canvas around and find a better angle, do that. I'm trying to keep mine as upright as possible just for the camera's benefit, but it definitely adds a challenge. Okay, coming back and going to a little more purple here. Gonna have to be careful about that big glob of red. All right, here we are. Okay, yeah, I kind of like how we're getting a few different variations in the shadow colors there. That's pretty good. Just kind of keep everything uneven, keep it really organic and natural. I think that's another thing I like about this piece is that it's it's got the straight lines, the man-made straight lines, and then it's got a lot of organic-y, natural colors to it. And that just, I don't know, nice contrast, I think. Looking a little too patterny. Uh-oh. Oh boy. Okay. Okay, I'll let that go. Now it looks like these two areas are too close in color. So if you look up here at the original, that one's got a nice bright green streak up the side just to kind of define the edge there. So I'll come back in with some of this green and just kind of redefine that edge again. That's maybe a little too yellow. Okay, don't want to lose the intention of it being in shadow. Just brighten it up so that you can see that there are two separate planes. One facing this way and one facing that way. A little touch of white over the top. Okay, stopping there before I go overboard and moving on. All right, the last block I want to fill in here is going to be very, very light. Lot of white. Little green. Just kind of mixing that on my plate over here. This is a really, really, really bright color. All right, don't overload your palette too much. Is that bright enough, do you think? More white. I don't want to go over it too many times, so I want it the right color right away. In this case, the right color means the right brightness, basically, because our colors are going to vary a lot. Got a little wobbly on some of my edges there. Whoop, there we are. Okay, I'll call it straight now and move on. A little color variation. Okay, stopping. Yeah, we could color variation this one to death, but should probably just move on. All right, so I've got this large area over here that's just kind of a splash a bunch of green down. I've got below the plate where it's a lot of purple. That's all pretty dark shadow colors, so I'll probably do some shadows pretty soon here. Got a lot of detail in the doorknob and on the rest of the plate that I want to make sure I don't miss. So, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Rinse the brush. We'll go back to the green in a second, but for now I want to switch to some purple shadows. So just taking a little red, little blue, mixing up a nice little purple. All right, now here's where we get to do some really straight lines. Take a deep breath, hold it, and make a line. If it gets a little wobbly, we're going to blame it on this being an old rusty door. So I'm just going right around some of those edges. And with that Sharpie, it's really easy to see where we should be painting our shadows. Okay, and if I'm getting too overboard with some of these darks, don't worry about it. That is not something to be worrying about right now because we're going to be coming back over this. We can paint around it and next to it with the greens. We can paint over it with the greens. We've got our options still, so no worries. One thing I'm going to look at right now is this doorknob. You can see the shadow coming down. There, I'm just going to add a little bit of purple to that. Just like with our rust showing through everything, this little bit of purple will show through, and we'll already have our shadow when we get to that part. Okay, keep going with the purple. Let's see, you might want a little bit more down this. We're practically outlining the whole plate, almost. All right, we can get some shadow in along that wall edge. And remember, we're still going to cover all this green. I want to kind of work left to right here. And all right, a little more shadow. So with the shadow, I'll just keep right on going. I know I've got a lot of shadow area that's coming in here around the screw holes. So I'll add that now. You should be able to still see those if you added Sharpie. If not, just make them up. Okay, there's kind of this double edge around the doorknob, kind of two circles. And don't go too overboard on these because we need that rust to show through. This is the rustiest part. I mean, this is the painting, right? The rusty doorknob. Here we're painting the rusty doorknob, so let the rust show through. And yes, I'm still using this big fat brush, but I'm just using the corner of it. And I can get cover small areas with paint that way and get pretty thin little lines. All right, I'm looking at this area in here, which right over here is kind of heavy and dark and pretty rusty. So picking up that purple still, but it's a little heavier on the red this time. Just kind of wheel down that line. There, so now a little bit more red, do the same thing at the top. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. A little more shadow right here. Let's see, I think a little more shadow right in here. And for this shadow, I have very little paint on the brush, and I'm just kind of swiping some paint right along that bottom edge of that doorknob just to really darken it without going overboard. Make sure I'm getting all the shadow edges in here right now because I don't want to go back and do shadows later if I don't have to. The goal is to get them all done right now. Okay, I can add a little bit of a shadow. Oops, too much paint on the brush there. On the side of on the corner of the plate. Okay, I don't want this to get too dark. All right, I think I'm going to stop there with the shadows and switch back to my green. I mean, you're always welcome to anytime come back in here and fill in your keyhole and your keys if you like. I guess I'll probably do that now. And I'm just filling this in with a dark purple right now. And heck, if my purple's dark enough, maybe I won't need black at all. And at this point, really, if you wanted to switch to a tiny brush for some of this detail, I'm just darkening it so I can remember where my key was when I do come back with the black. So this is not the final layer. So not super worried. Okay, so now I'm going to come back into this area with my green and then fill in the right side with the green. Still just working from left to right in an effort to keep my hands out of the wet paint. Gotta do what you gotta do. Okay, back to that green. So I'll start with the plate, and then the doorknob. Reason is there's two different brushes that we'll be using. We have the filbert brush, which is nice and round, does organic round shapes very well. And then this this angle shader is really good with straight lines. So that's how we have it broken up. All right, I'm just gonna kind of take this green. I think I want, it's kind of okay, but let's mix up some more. More yellow, more blue, a little white, and more white. Okay. Less white. Maybe a little paler. And down toward the bottom, we definitely want to have thinner paint, as in a drier, slightly drier brush. So when we drag the paint along over the top of that rust color, less paint will be left behind. See, that's why I wasn't too worried about that keyhole quite yet being the right color. Okay. Better not go too dark with it though. I might lose it all together. So we want to have that really light color. So I'm taking this white and we want that to be around the keyhole, surrounding the keyhole, because that is our point, that's our attention area. That's where we want people to look. So we have to have our highest contrast there. All right, switching brushes. Switching to that filbert brush with a rounded tip. Okay, and this I'm just kind of using the edge of the brush just to kind of scribble on some color. Just try to remember where the front of your plates are and where the side is. All right, back into some darker green. Maybe even add a touch of red to that. And I'll get my side shadow. So now it's because I'm using my filbert brush instead of that flat, it's a little bit more of a struggle to get the straight lines, but yeah, it can be done. Well, we did know there was a straight line challenge this month, so here you have it. And to have the most control with this technique, this is a lot of dry brushing technique over this entire painting. So to have the most control, have a very small amount of paint on your brush. Not very much at all. Okay, back to a little, if you can't see that, I'm back to a little bit of purple here. Just taking some of that mix of the blue and the red, bringing back in some of my shadows. If you want your shadows more red or more blue, you just go ahead and swap up the colors. I just want to kind of give this a little bit of a more rustic, rough edge. All right, I better let that one go. It's not green, so okay. gonna stop messing around and move on. All right, so I think I'm going to take a little bit more green here. Just add a touch, scribble a little bit on. Okay, more green yet. Take a little more yellow, a little more blue, less white, because this is going to be the shadow. More blue, more blue. Okay, so for the bottom edge of that plate, there we are, and this one should be in shadow, so it should be slightly darker. And on the right side, this is going to actually be quite a bit lighter, so, and I think it should be thinner than this. So make sure I have enough green on the front of the plate. Okay, and then I'll take a light green, mostly white, kind of along the edge of this plate. The right edge is going to be catching the most highlight. I'll try to even it out a little bit. One nice thing about working with rustic images is that your lines don't have to be perfectly straight to indicate a straight line. You can get away with an awful lot just by making some of your colors lighter and darker. Scrubbing on a little bit of color just to lighten and darken some areas, add a little more texture to some areas than others. The doorknob plate is one of the most texture-filled parts of this painting, so don't be afraid to add some shapes and textures and colors wherever you want them. All right, I've got my little bit of green now, and I'll just kind of use the flat of the brush and just sort of scribble on some of that green. You know, variety up a bit. Just change it to a slightly different color next time you pick up paint. Just kind of going around the whole front edge of that doorknob. All right, we'll have to add a couple of brighter spots, but I want this to dry for a couple of seconds first. So while I'm waiting for that doorknob to dry, I'll come back in on this plate here and add my lighter areas. I already have green on the brush, so I'll just add white to it. Just brighten that up. So if before today you weren't an expert at mixing color, now you are. And it's also very helpful to take a step back and look at this from a distance a couple of times. Okay, stop right there for a moment. What else can I do? Okay, I have these little screws. And the edge of the filbert, I'm just using the round edge of the filbert to just tapping a couple of colors in. And you can make it look pretty circly. Okay, and we can come back with shadow and add, wow, that got to be a really big one, didn't it? We'll add our shadow after this. Okay, leave those alone for now. And while I have some light color, I'll bring some variation onto the doorknob. Not too much, don't go overboard. And look at what you're painting more than you look at the reference photo in this case, because this doorknob should not be getting all the attention, and if it is, back off, lighten it up, don't go overboard. All right. I'm gonna let that go, stay there, and then work on this right-hand side. So back to my angle shader, the big brush. Still have some yellow, still have some blue. That one got a touch of red in it. Little tiny touch of white. Maybe a little bit. Well, no, not yet. Be really choppy with this. Don't try to fill in that whole background. It's not meant to be filled in. This is just kind of some loose, choppy brush strokes, just to kind of indicate there's more wall happening over there. But we don't need to indicate any of the details in that wall. Okay, now I'll take a little touch of white this time. There, just go over a couple of areas. All right, leave that alone. Wait patiently. Okay, that's enough waiting patiently. And on to our tiny little round brush. As always, dunk the brush in the water first. The couple of little tiny details that I want to use this small brush for have some shadows around those screw holes and that keyhole. That's kind of about where I'm at right now. After that, I think I might leave it alone and let it go. I'll take a second look and we'll see how it is after that. So purple, remember purple's the shadow color. Less paint. See, there I go, sticking my hand in the wet paint. Oh man. I want just a tiny bit of paint on the brush so I can kind of smudge it around a little. If you can smudge it around, it kind of seems like you have a little bit more control over it. This is a very rustic painting. Got to keep in line with the texture. Before I go too much further, I just want to make sure that's going to end up looking like it's supposed to. Taking just a touch of white. All right. Back up to those top screw holes. Let's see. Should we do the highlights first? Maybe so. Yeah, I think I'll do it kind of the same way I did it last time with, I'll do the shadow first. Okay, so back to that purple. I think I want a slightly more reddish purple this time, so I'm mixing more red than blue. Just kind of some crooked little dashes around that. Around the screw. Oh, sorry, I might get my head in the way. I didn't mean to. It's one of those when you start working on the details, you want to kind of like stick your nose up to it so you can pay attention to the details. That's kind of what I'm doing here. There. Not intentionally, just happening. Just adding a little bit more texture around some of these screw holes. They look like they're sticking out a little too much, so just adding some texture to help them fade into the doorknob plate a little better. And this is just kind of, it's a dark purple, or it's a reddish purple, but it looks a lot like the rust, so that's helping to bring back some of the rust look. There's nothing wrong with that. If you run out of rust, bring it back. Painting's called Rusty Doorknob after all. And if your edges get too smooth, you can finger paint, you can scroll them out, you can do whatever you need to make them not smooth. The edges should not be smooth. Pretty much anywhere on this painting. I mean, I know we have some straight edges, but... Okay. I don't know if I want to add highlights to those. Maybe a little. Okay, rinsing out that small brush in the water. Picking up a little bit of really light green. Well, that's nice and rustic looking, isn't it? Okay. I was worried that was going to be overboard, but I guess it's not, and that's fine. Okay, I think we're getting into shape here. I do have a couple of areas. I think I'll do a few more highlights right now. I'll just pick up a little more white because I know this area needs to be brighter. We want emphasis on that key. Okay, so we're just going to do a highlight right through that key. Brighten that spot up just to give it some pow. All right, and I said that I was going to avoid black until the very end, and look, good job. We did it. So now we'll just take a little tiny dot of black. Not much, just a little. And this is going for that keyhole, so still using the small brush. Trying not to make a mess. Actually, I think I'll take some of that black and blend it in with my purple, because I already have the purple there. And let's see if I can remember where that keyhole is. Well, I guess that's pretty close, right? Okay, a little more black this time. Tiny touch of water to get that black to flow more smoothly. And bring that along the key. Yep, painted over that highlight. It's fine. I'll bring it back. Touch up some edges. It's not so bad. I think I'll keep it. All right, so a couple of last little highlights I want to do. Swishing out that small brush back to some white paint here. And this is just plain white paint. Mix in a little water to it so that it's flowing beautifully, because we're going to put it right on that key. Where else would we want to brighten up? We can brighten up a few areas, I think. Let's see. Taking most of the paint back off that brush so I can just scribble a little bit of really light color. Something that you want a lot of texture with your brushes, you want textureful brushes if you can. If you have bristle brushes, that's something that's going to lend itself very well to this technique. This brush is a very soft bristle brush. It's meant for fine detail, not so much for texture. So I'm having to kind of fake it and use just small amounts of paint, dry brush on the texture. Maybe even some finger painting. Okay, I see one area that I might want to, I think I'll go back to the filbert. Right, so there's, should be a little bit brighter back in here. So I'm just taking a touch of white. Just barely touching the canvas with almost no paint on the brush. Just brightening that right up. All right, I think I don't want to go too far overboard, so I'm probably going to quit right where it is right now. If you see any touch-ups that you need to make on yours, feel free, go ahead. The last details with the highlights and the shadows are going to make the biggest difference of the whole thing. So just some, I'd say, small touch-ups, don't go overboard. See, even just a little bit of white right there, and it just, oopsies, kind of makes it pop in a way that it didn't before. All right, I think I got mine nice and rustic here. Just taking a second look to see if I want to change. And I think I'm going to call it. So here we have it. Here is our rusty doorknob version 2. I hope you enjoyed it. And if there are any paintings that you want to see coming up, or any techniques that you want to try coming up, let me know, because rust is one that I've been wanting to try, and now I want to try it with watercolor. So I'm going to say expect to see something with rust in watercolor soon. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for subscribing to Creative Box Live.